Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Hampton Roads Power BI user group. We have an exciting meeting ahead and want to be respectful of our speakers' time, so we'll head and get rolling. As always, we have the same agenda, a couple of announcements, our feature presentation, and then we'll end with an exciting raffle. If you want to participate in the raffle, we'll tell you how at the end. So stick around and you can win an Amazon gift card. That sounds good. We'll get started. The big announcement, sort of the same as last month. Microsoft Community has incorporated the user groups into their own site, which is really nice. So you can find us at community.powerbi.com. Before it was through a third party, and that was sort of the official way. So now it's all under the Microsoft umbrella and a lot easier to find. If you're looking at the screenshot under the community on the main Power BI website, you can find user groups. And then if you have location services enabled on your browser, ours will be the top result or whichever one's closest to you. We still have our Meetup and website and all other socials and things because most of our users come from Meetup, but just another resource to have, so always helpful. It's the same content as you'll see on the Meetup. It has our speaker information, the event information, and the meeting link is there too, so you can kind of access it from either way. Power BI updates, we usually go over all of them from the last month, and this time we've had a bit of delay in the monthly updates, so no June Power BI updates overall, but there's still always things that they're doing. So a new version of the Power BI report builder was pushed out. Now for the first time, you can get it on the Microsoft Store if your organization goes through that, or if you find that easier to get the automatic updates. And they actually rebuilt it from the ground up using the 64 architecture instead of the archaic 32. And they have a new data tab where you can quickly access data. It's a little bit easier to use. One of the other updates, email notifications for non-owners of data flows. So just like how you can type in specific users to get email notifications when reports or databases are updated, data sets are updated in the service, you can now do the same thing for data flows. And then one other thing, you can embed Power BI reports directly in Salesforce. So from what I saw, I think the main Power BI updates for this month should still come out in the coming week or so. We'll just keep our eye on that. On to our feature presentation. Today we have Reid Havens with us. He is a Microsoft MVP. You've probably seen his content if you ever searched anything related to Power BI. His site, Havens Consulting, has a lot of really good information. I usually find his videos all over YouTube and Twitter, and really excellent content. Definitely one of the best Power BI content creators out there. So super excited to have him joining us. And with that, I can just pass it on over.
Awesome. Let me go ahead and click on there you go, my camera, and drop my monitor a little bit. There you go. All right. And share my screen. Number 2. Perfect. Able to hear and see the presentation?
Looks good on my end.
Cool. Perfect. Everyone, thanks for tuning in today. I think it's, you can't remember, you guys 2 or 3 hours ahead? I'm over on West Coast.
3.
3 hours. Perfect. So afternoon my time, evening your time. Thanks for joining today. Actually excited to walk you through some of the things that we have in our presentation that's actually going to talk about a lot of really interesting and unique ways to utilize buttons, not only as action items, but also other ways to even utilize them as visuals in a lot of aspects. And with a lot of the stuff that I do both on YouTube and otherwise, I do a lot of content creation and just fun kind of upgrades, tips, tricks, and techniques to really kind of supercharge your reports and just give it a bit of a unique twist and spin, add a little bit of aesthetic magic in there. But for a little background about myself, for those not familiar with me, I've been a 3-year running Microsoft MVP. award given to people who create a lot of community-based content and provide a lot of resources out there kind of by the community and for the community. I've been in the industry now for about 8 years working with analytics, starting back in Excel, working my way up to Power BI kind of as it slowly started to evolve over time with Microsoft. And overall, a couple of years ago, I had a couple of other MVPs continuously give me the nickname of the VizWiz, so I decided to embody that with a little avatar that I had created for a lot of my YouTube thumbnails and everything else. So that's the little guy that you can see in the upper corner, upper left-hand corner there. But I love teaching and presentations. This is probably my 70th talk that I've given over the years, both locally and internationally. So it's something that I very much enjoy, just connecting with the community and being able to share information. So that's a little bit about me. What I'll mention here. The great thing with this presentation is it's very modular. I can scale it down and up depending on how much time I have. We probably won't get through entirely everything that you see on here, but as much as we can given the time available, and just a lot of great little snack-sized utilizations for both bookmarks and buttons that you have within Power BI Desktop as you're developing. So most of this will be demo-driven, so I'm going to go ahead and flip out of the presentation mode, pop over into Power BI Desktop, and kind of walk you through each of these. Let's see. So what I want is time perspectives. Here we go. And let me make sure that my Zoom is working. Beautiful. That's also working as well. So first thing that I'm going to walk through here is I'll describe the scenario, business problem, and the solution. It's one thing that one reason that I love developing still, even to this day, outside of training and teaching, is I learn a lot of interesting ways to utilize the tool because of that. Client provides me a scenario that I might not have thought of myself, but I come up with an interesting solution for that. So this first little demo that we're going to go through is actually utilizing bookmarks to change time perspectives in mass for multiple visuals on a report page, because the client came to me and he wanted to click a single button that shifted all of the charts and graphs from like a month level to a quarter level or a day level, and be able to switch those around without having to go through individually and click like one at a time to go from here. And as many visuals as you have on the page, that's as many times as you'll have to use the hierarchy controls to navigate between those. Instead, they wanted an ability just to go and select a single button, essentially a bookmark at the top, and clicking it automatically switches to the next level or down to the lower level. So you have a single user action that is triggering a multi-action event with the bookmark itself. So what I want to do is actually then walk you through creating one of these and then talk about exactly what's going on with each one of these. To start with, I'm going to go ahead and open up a couple of tabs that are over here. I'm going to open up my selection pane. I'm going to open up my bookmarks pane. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to talk about a few things that I have in here. Number one at the top, and we'll get to this in our next demo, I actually have two versions of each button here at the top. The reason that it toggles kind of between them, like when I click month, the button itself is essentially indicating to the user, this is the activated bookmark. It went from a lighter to a darker color. And the way that I actually achieve this, if I open this up here, you will notice that there's actually two versions of the buttons in here. Day has two, same selected and unselected. Month also has a selected and not selected, and vice versa with quarter. Each one of those has two versions of it. So part of the action for the bookmark that I'll create in a minute is it not only toggles the level of all of these items down here using the hierarchy controls, it also basically hides and reverses one of the selections over here. So watch what happens when I select day. Right now, day selected is hidden. Day not selected is visible. When I click it, you'll notice that these things reverse. Now day is selected, day is now visible. The not selected is not visible. So it, to the user, looks like it basically activated, but the only way to really achieve that effect is you have to have a separate button with different formatting. And the way that I'm doing this is if I actually select it and kind of show you some of the settings in here, with any buttons, you have three primary states: default, hover, and press. Now, for basically the selected button, the one that shows that it's activated, the fill color is the same color for all three. Like there's no effect. It doesn't look like you can click it. When I hover, it doesn't change colors. But the other ones, there's the default. This is on hover. That is on press. So there's three separate colors that are happening to make it appear to have a click type effect, similar to like a website or anything else. So it clearly looks like you can click it because it's changing the shade of the color on it when you hover over it, indicating to them that this is a pressable button. Whereas this one I basically just darken it to the active color to make it static and appear like it's already been selected. So that's essentially what I did for each one of these. Is there's just two versions of those buttons stacked on top of each other. And at any time, there's only one version of them visible, depending on if I'm at the month, the quarter, or the day level. So I'm going to go ahead and use the month as an example. I'm going to set everything up, and then I'm going to create a bookmark from there. So I'm going to zoom out. And like I said, the bookmark that I'm going to create is a test case to basically demonstrate this. I'm going to set up the environment. So I want everything to be at the month level. So I'm going to go to the next level in all four of these visuals as if I was creating this from scratch. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now I want these also. I want this button to be the one that's activated. So I'm going to come over to the visibility section. I'm going to hide the quarter one, unhide not selected, so that's been unselected. And again, hide the month one, unhide this one. So now the buttons look like they should when I'm at the month level, meaning this is the activated button. So those have both been set up. And now an important part of creating bookmarks to help ensure that there's no potential issues with accidentally toggling other perspectives or triggering other filters that you don't want to. It's important to select only the visuals that you care about. So in this case, I'm going to select the entire group for date buttons, because when you do that, everything inside of a group that's in here becomes part of that selection. So I don't actually have to go through and select all these individually, which would look more like that. I just simply have to select that. And then if I hold Control, I want to select the 4 visuals that are in here that I also want to filter. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, when I click Add for the bookmark, I'm going to go ahead and just rename this month test. There you go. And let's configure it a little bit. So to start with, data is something that I want to have checked because there's 3 primary things that a bookmark captures. The data state, which is any filters, slicers on the page, filters in the filter pane, levels of a hierarchy on any visual. Those are all captured in the data. So that needs to be checked because I am going to update the hierarchy level in these visuals. Display also needs to be checked because we are toggling the display of those buttons at the top. So those two need to be checked. Current page I will uncheck because this bookmark isn't functioning to navigate to any specific page. So it helps to remind me what this bookmark is doing if I come back to it later. So I'll uncheck that. Now the important part, and honestly 99.9% of your visuals should have selected visuals chosen. It's pretty rare where you're going to want a bookmark that universally affects every single thing on the page. Normally it's a subsection of visuals on the page in some degree. So now select visuals. When I have that selected, what that actually does is it's now saying this is only related to these and these. Everything else that's in my selection pane is going to be ignored. It doesn't matter what the configurations were at the time of the capture. It is ignoring everything except what I've just highlighted. So that's why you have selected visuals chosen, is it just kind of puts a security frame around the bookmark to make sure that it's not going to accidentally update anything you don't want it to. All right, so now let's go ahead and test it. I'm going to go back to the quarter level, and now I'm just going to click on bookmark test to see the effect happening from there. So you select it. We've now seen that it did the corresponding actions that we wanted to for the buttons. It toggled them appropriately using the display capture, and from those 4 visuals, it captured the hierarchy level that I was at and then updated it to go to that level. So using a bookmark, we're able to not really filter as much as navigate between levels. Personally, it would be nice if there was a way to have the level that you're displaying in the hierarchy in something else besides data, because I would really like filtering and just display to kind of almost be separate, but that's where it's captured in. But you can now see an interesting use case for bookmarks, which is a little less conventional. Most people create macro buttons to activate a bunch of slicers or something like that, but you can also use it to just toggle the levels of a hierarchy within a visual. There's a lot of different things that bookmarks can capture. But I'll pause here and ask if there's any questions pertaining to what I just demonstrated, and if not, then I can move on to the next demonstration as well. And remind me if people can come off mute if they need to, yeah? I know sometimes certain hosts prefer to have them type it in, so just double checking.
I think with Teams, it automatically has them have to type it in.
Does okay. I will have that monitored over on my left screen then. If I have that at the moment.
No questions come in yet.
Okay, perfect. I have that over there now. All right, I will go ahead and move on to the next demonstration. And this one. All right. So another, going to be a quick one, but another really interesting utilization of bookmarking in here is using it to actually capture the focus mode state. So what I will essentially show you in here is, again, a client scenario. They did not like the fact that these were conditional. They wanted these to turn on and stay on at all times. Unfortunately, there's no option to say always show the title header in a visual. The visual header up there is conditional only when you hover over it. But they wanted essentially this to be there at all times to be able to just have users easily come and notice the ability to just have it pop out in that regard. So doing some digging, I was able to figure out, just basically I found an icon that exists and I turned off the visual header and I anchored that in there, created a bookmark, and was able to then provide the ability for an always on focus mode button using a unique way to use a bookmark plus a added image to the page. This was something that I just got off of Google. I looked for a non-copyrighted image that basically was free domain, just for an expand out icon. Downloaded it, used the option up here to go to insert and add image into your report, and just mostly a matter of resizing into there. And the bookmark itself is fairly simple. So as a bit of a rinse and repeat to also talk about some best practices, I'm going to open up my bookmarks and my selection pane. Number one thing you should always do whenever you're updating anything is creating a bookmark is to make sure that you are selecting the visual that you care about. And in this case, the only thing that I care about is that revenue by month. And actually, let's do this. I'll do it from my starting point. There you go. So select that visual. There you go, revenue by month. Now I'm going to expand out. There we go. Now it's in focus mode. I'm going to select add. It's a very simple one to put in. And again, I'll just call this focus mode test. There we go. And we can turn off data, current page, and it only displays being affected and selected visuals. So now I'll close that back out. There we go. You can see that if I click on the bookmark button, it basically pops it back into the focus mode option. So the only thing that it is doing is affecting the display. And focus mode is part of the display, by the way. It's not just whether or not they're visible from the selection pane. In the service, the spotlight feature is something that can be captured by bookmarks. So as an example, this. That is something that when you kind of spotlight a visual where it kind of whites out everything else and focuses specifically on that, that's something you could create and assign to a button if you wanted to. So there's a lot of display things that can be done on a page, spotlight, focus mode, and again, a few other service only features that can be captured as part of that state. So a lot of these demonstrations are really designed to help show you the various possibilities that are available with bookmarks besides simply just, oh, it's a macro filter command where it can just capture a few filter states. There's a lot of clever uses for this with using custom images and icons related to those. So that was one thing that I found. And this one's a pretty quick demo. Overall, the bookmark's fairly easy and straightforward, but it's just showing you some of the creative use cases you can have when deploying those, both with images and just what they can actually capture as part of some of those states. Are there any questions on this one? And go ahead and close this one down then. I don't think I see anybody typing it up, so close you down, and no. All right. I was actually happy with this one. I did this a couple months ago earlier this year. Again, client scenario. So they wanted a kind of a radio toggle button in Power BI. The action of it isn't as important. I'm just toggling between two visuals, but you can see up here that I have a kind of like a slider button that actually goes back and forth. If I click that, there you go. It filters or basically just toggles the visibility of one chart to another. This could honestly be any action. I'm just choosing to do a visibility toggle between two visuals just to show you the effect of that. But the goal of this demonstration is to show you how to format a native button to get this effect. This isn't a custom image. I didn't make this in Photoshop or anything else. I'm using a standard out-of-the-box bookmark button with a bit of formatting and some clever design practices on here to get the effect from this. So we're going to come over to here. And, like with anything else, there's two versions of it. When it's toggled for one type, this is the one that's showing. It starts on the right, moves to the left. The other one starts on the left, moves to the right, and they basically share the same color patterns, but it's creating the effect of kind of activated one versus another via the two kind of binary choices you can have of A or B. So I'm going to go ahead and show you kind of how I made this bookmark and the, kind of discussing how the sausage is made in that regard. Here we go. Let's come over here. So the button itself, as we've discussed earlier, has a couple of different states that are available for it. We have the default, hover, and press. Each one of these can be set for many different attributes that are in here. The button, outline, fill. So I'll kind of just walk through top to bottom the various states that are in here and what was formatted. So the text itself, one thing that's fun with Windows computers that I learned a couple of years ago is if you press the Windows key and semicolon, you get an emoji keyboard that pops up. This is built into Windows 10. And if I look for circle, you can see that it actually brings up a couple of options that are in here. And I just went through and I like, oh, that kind of that white circle with a black border around it, that looks aesthetically pleasing. I'm going to go ahead and use that as the dot that I want to use in here. So that's all I did is I added it into here and then did some alignment stuff. I'll mention those in a second. I do want to mention one caveat about using any of these little slider icons though. So with these, when you're implementing them, they do change depending on the operating system that you're in. So meaning that it's going to look this way in Windows. Every other OS will have versions of this available in their emoji library, but it will look a little bit different on an Android phone or an Apple iOS phone, Linux. They all have slightly different libraries on what a white circle should look like. So it might change depending on the device this is being consumed on. So just be cognizant of that. Anytime you use an emoji in a title or in a button like this, that it might look a little bit different on other devices. So it is a good reason to just at least see what is going to be what device the users will be consuming the reports off of. So my one little caveat to kind of mention in here. But otherwise, a couple of things that I just do onto here. So the default state, I have it located over on the right. And then on the hover, it is in the middle, which is why when you hover, it's now showing in the middle. And then on on press, left alignment. So that's creating the kind of sliding toggle effect. There's not a way to animate it. There's just the three states at the moment, but it creates a near, identical effect to kind of moving from one side to the other as you go through this overall. All right, shrink that down. A couple of other things that I did as well. So on the outline, you actually have an ability to turn that on or off. If I was to drop this back down to 0, it goes back to a square button. So the nice thing that they added a couple years ago was the ability to do rounded edges. So sometimes it gets a little glitchy. It normally should allow me to immediately type in 20 and get rid of the 0, but I have it set to a 20 pixel rounded edges, which gives that a nice radio button look and allows it to, again, look like something that's less just out of the box and more like an item you might even create in Photoshop. And between that, 3 color states, the default is the blue. I went for a neutral gray in the middle and then that purple on the left. Same thing I did with the fill between those. I had just the 3 different default, hover, and press, so they match up. And it's essentially the same but reversed effect that is on the lower button here for the area chart. And with the 2 of those stacked on top of each other, and the visibility, just like we saw in the previous demonstration, when you activate it, one of them hides, the other one becomes visible, and then whatever other effect you needed in terms of toggling levels of a hierarchy in a visual, or in this case, just switching 2 visuals around. So this radio toggle can be used to toggle anything, but the achieving effect is just creating a custom button that's on the page versus just more of like the generic bookmark button that you might be used to seeing, where it's typically just a button and a little symbol with not too much of an effect going on there. So they are very versatile in their configurations and customization when it comes to just coloring and formatting. There's a lot of options within the buttons, even more to come within the next couple of years that I'm excited to see. But the level of configuration is something that I very much appreciate about them. And you'll continue to see that in some more demos. But for this, just with creating the 2 radio buttons, are there any questions on this one before I move on to the next demo?
That's an awesome implementation. I remember
Thank you.
When buttons first came out, the first thing I did was create a radio button toggle, but it was just 2 images switching back and forth.
Yep. And even that wasn't a feature initially that was out from day one, but then eventually they added the option to assign a bookmark to an image rather than just buttons. And like you said, that's something I used to do as well. As I would create something in PowerPoint or something like that that would look like a button on and a button off, and then I would figure out a way to bring it into Power BI. All right, go ahead and close this. And there we go. Another useful implementation of buttons in this one, though you might not think it. So what I have in here, again, client scenario, they wanted a like a multi-value card to be brought in to essentially just display data and have multiple metrics within it. So in this case, I'm gonna select around a bit. So there we go. Essentially, there's a number and there's a bar, red or green, and that's just determined off of a metric they have. I concatenated some values together, which is really, is this number above or below the plan? If it's below it, make it red. If it's above it, make it green. So it looks like a single card. It is in fact, let me see if I can grab it. There we go. This, if I ungroup it, there we go. 2 different cards. It's not even the fact that it is 2 different cards itself. If you look over here, the bottom is just a single value card with a concatenated measure that's in there. Each one of these is just something where one measure returns the percentage. This part isn't as important because that's just a simple measure returning some kind of text concatenated value. The unique solution to this that I stacked on top of it, what I have up here, this is actually a button. Now the button itself, a couple of clever uses of this. This right here, this is the actual button. The thing that you see at the top, that is technically the title of the button. Because every object in Power BI, text boxes, lines, you can give a title to anything. It's a common universal attribute. But I was trying to figure out a way to like create a bar and a title and all these other things using as few visuals as possible. So my original mock-up and creation of this was this card here. But the problem was, it's 1. I'm just going to ungroup you. 2 and 3. I had 3 different things that was going into this. I used a button to do the fill. I used a single value card to create the value at the top and another value at the bottom. But the more visuals you add to the page, the slower it can get. To give a little bit of performance background on web browsers, they are single threaded, so they load in CSS 1 object at a time as they're loading the web page. They don't load in parallel. So the more visuals that you have, the longer it can take for the report to load. It doesn't matter how big or small your model is, how fast it is. It's just going to take time to load visuals. So anytime I'm building any of these, I always try to think, all right, how can I do this, but with as few stacked objects as possible, because I want as few visuals on the screen as possible. So that's why I went from just having this as a button without a title with some color logic in there to this result over here, where the button itself just has a thin little line, just like the other one, but the clever part comes in, honestly, through the titling. So I'll walk you through both. The fill here, and anytime you see one of these symbols, by the way, f of x, that means that I can put a measure into here. And a measure itself can have some logic, and then basically it spits out a hex code. If logic A is met, red. If logic B is met, green. So instead of having a single color every time you make a slicer selection or anything else, the color can change. This can be the fill color. This could be the background color. If I had a shadow on here, this could be the shadow color. Anytime you see this symbol, that means that this color can dynamically change based off of some DAX criteria. So let me open this up and I'll show you the measure. Again, the logic in here isn't as important as just realizing you can use the button for this, but it's coming from a DAX calculation called completed KPI colors. I'll just show that KPI color. Let's pick this one. There we go. So basically, I just have a calculation here. This variance that I have, if it is greater than or equal to 0, return green. Green is just a variable I declared. That's the hex code for green that I wanted to use in this report. Otherwise, return red. Simple calculation, but this basically has two outputs that are specified in here. And the only time you can assign one, by the way, whenever you do go into assign a measure this way, it does require that that measure return text hex code outputs or RGB. If it's designed in any other way, you just won't be able to select it. Like notice that I can't select this. I cannot select the. There's a lot of different ones that I'm not able to select, except for certain ones that actually have specified outputs. So I go back just so I can put it back in there again. There you go. So that's what I'm doing for the body. And again, this is the point that I got where, all right, I'm just going to stack a third card on top. But then, I'm trying to optimize and make this just load faster in a web browser. So like, how can I reduce the number of visuals if at all possible? Well, the other place that you can use conditional formatting to apply some fancy little whiz-bang logic is the title. The title does not have to be static, like, title. Normally it would be something like that. But what you can do is you can also have a measure return a text output and spit it into the title itself. So I'm going to show you what that is. As long as it is formatted to be a text output in the measure, it can look like a number, it can smell like a number, it just has to be formatted as text. Let me zoom out so I can just see how many times. There we go. So the name of this one is completed amount. So let me show that to you. Completed, there you go. Simple as that, like whatever the base calculation is, as long as it's wrapped in format, because format converts whatever you're giving it into text with the format specified. And this would also be as well. Any of the Excel format strings that would essentially show up into there. So in this case, as long as that measure has been converted to text, then you can come into the title text, specify it in here, and now the title is basically going to be the measure itself. So now I've reduced from what originally was 3 different cards stacked on top of each other to 2, where it looks like a single value card with a bar below it, but it's a button with the fill of the body of the button itself as red, and then the title has now become my actual displayed metric, but it's allowed me to reduce from 3 to 2, so 33% optimization that way. And then this way you can just have them groups. And now you have that single card floating around. So some clever ways to use conditional formatting. And also you can see that the button itself, I don't even have an action assigned to it. It's simply there because it's able to be multi-layered. Honestly, I could have also similarly used a text box to do this, but just because there's so many other things that I can do with buttons for a lot of other reasons, I typically defer to them. But as far as load time for both, they're only a couple milliseconds off from each other, whether or not I used a text box with the body of the text box filled and this at the top. One of the reasons that I honestly prefer to use a button is the text box. That down, there we go. Here's the issue that I don't like developing with the text box. Every time I click it, this comes up. So like during development, it's kind of annoying to have this constantly here and it doesn't go away. So at least with a button, when I'm adding it to the page, even if I can do the same thing with both, there's no extra, little pop-up that's coming up that's just kind of annoying me as I'm in development. The end user experience is identical, but that's the one reason that one of the reasons that I lean towards buttons when using them for things that are outside of their original intention. Are there any questions on this one? And while that's actually waiting, I will spin up a couple of other Power BI reports that I can go through as well. And close this down. There we go. And you can open up the PowerPoint. There we go. And I'll save you. One of the more magical ones, as the name implies that you can see, is I created a bunch of buttons with GIFs and did some photoshopping in PowerPoint to essentially create these. So I'll start from the top left as an example. Created a button that the hover effect is a scrolling marquee bar that's at the bottom. You click it, just gets darker. The one over here, just a cascading kind of rainfall of it. I just was trying to figure out what kind of animations could I add to make it a little bit more fun. The ones that I actually like the most are the ones that are down here, which is a series of like kind of sheens that travel back and forth. But what it is it's a nice subtle indicator for people to like, hey, you can go click this button. You know, it just helps to kind of direct the eyes towards something. If they don't maybe realize that button's clickable, or let's just assume that there's a scenario where you might build a report that constantly has new users coming to see it, then this is kind of just like a subtle way to provide some kind of just a visual indication, animation that realizes, oh, what is this thing over here that's moving? And then they hover over it. They can, you can realize that they can click it and interact with it. The last one was there. I just created a Millennium Falcon hyperdrive GIF that went onto that button. But the nice thing with all of these as an example is that you can add images to the background of them, which includes GIFs or SVGs. It doesn't just have to be built-in things. So most of the stuff that I'll be showing for this one is going to be in my PowerPoint and showing you how I made these, but I'll just select one of these as an example and show you that when you're over the fill section, you have an option to actually add an image right there. Back, so that puts it back in there. Thank you. And you can have different ones on different states if you really wanted to as well. Default versus like the one that's actually a good example of that is here. The default state is an image. On hover and press is a GIF, so I can have more than one. That's why it doesn't move when I'm not hovering over it, and it starts to move when I do. It's actually loading separate images each time. And I made an effort to make all of these, by the way, in PowerPoint because I wanted to provide a file for people to download when I did this on YouTube to have them be able to reproduce it easily. And a lot of people don't have Photoshop and other stuff, or even the skills in those. So I figured out a way to do all of these in PowerPoint and a couple of export options. So various slides that are in here that I just created some images and some animations. So if I actually show up, I'll just pick one as an example. Let's do this one. This is the one that changes colors. So you'll notice that there's an animation section, 2 bars that just track to the right, track to the left. If you actually animate it, it's just a slide that does that. And then it's actually, let's see, I need to go back. Here we go. All right. And then it waits about 4 seconds and repeats the animation. There we go. So what it does, and the reason that I'm doing that animation very specifically is I want to create a perfect loop. You don't want to create a GIF or any other animation where you see it kind of jump from end to beginning. So each one of those is 4 seconds. It's 4 seconds over, it waits 4 seconds, and then it's 4 seconds back. And then what I actually do is we have 12 seconds total right there. That's already been done. And you have an option you can actually export as video, and you can create an animated GIF. And then you can also set how many seconds to spend on each slide. So the 16 is essentially what I wanted to do. So what this does is it allows for the 4 second start, 4 second pause in the middle. It does 4 seconds back. It adds an extra 4 seconds to the end of that little animation, and then it restarts. So now it's created a perfect loop. There's 4 seconds that occur with each thing, and you can pick whatever number you want, but I just essentially figured out just a fun way to utilize PowerPoint and some basic tracking animations using the animation pane in this file to create a whole bunch of these. Similarly, I did it with the piece here, with that animation that's in here. Again, with the idea that anytime you want something to repeat, you want things to not jar from the end to the beginning. So where I have it placed at the very end, you'll notice it actually stops perfectly back on top of the bar. So it moves forward, but then stops. So like it will essentially finish exactly when the next loop will begin. And then I created that for like a 6 second animation, and it essentially just looks like it scrolls forever because it just continuously perfectly loops, as you can see here. It's the same animation just moving through that. You might notice, by the way, that the angles change a little bit. It is a 16:9 slide that was stretched out. So I also tried to create things that I really wouldn't matter that much about. This one has the bars angled a bit more. The bars on here are going to be a bit wider just because it got stretched out to fill basically that button. But again, all of the objects that I'm using, it's not really important because they're not objects that are going to look unnaturally stretched out in that case. But it shows you another just fun way of like things you can infuse into the buttons to add a bit of fun, you know, put a little aesthetic magic into there. But are there any questions on any of the buttons or kind of any of the things that I did in the PowerPoint to create these?
That really is fantastic. Is there a noticeable performance impact from using GIFs over a static image?
Not really as far as the load. The button will load either way. The only thing that you do add a little bit of is file bloat, like, you know, if this is a 1 megabyte GIF, then you'll add an extra megabyte in there. But most of the time, like for most reports, they're already like, you know, a couple hundred megabytes. And if you add 15 megs of a couple of animations in there, it's not going to slow the model down. The file is going to be a little bit bigger, and it takes an extra couple seconds to publish. But overall, the performance impact of like having it on or off is fairly negligible. If you're using some type of image, it's still better to, like, as you saw with the last demonstration where I created the radio toggle entirely from native buttons, that will, you know, that probably has a 15 or 20% performance increase versus the two, but you're also still looking at milliseconds. So it's something that you can observe in the performance analyzer, but you're never going to have a client probably notice the difference between those two. If there's 45 objects loaded on the page and you only have one button or maybe two, the difference of load time of those buttons with or without an image will never be something that is going to impact the overall like load time outside of like maybe 1 or 2%. All right, I'm gonna close this guy down. And yeah, let's see, was it this one? Yeah, I think I'll do this one. Okay. This is the last one I can finish up for the day. I prefer the conditional drill through, so I'm actually going to load this up. It's a more of a fun final demo. I think if I have to pick between the two, we got through a good chunk of them too, so this is good. It's fun. Like I created almost all of these, and now like there's the new model update, so I'm having to remember to save each one so I don't get that pop up every single time. But what we have is quite a few things that are down here. So notice that there is a make a filter selection. Right now, this is a button that isn't actually doing anything. I'll get through some of the features of this, probably not all of them, but I'll also have some supplemental videos for you to watch later because there's quite a few moving components. One, the button is showing conditional text. The pop-up is also showing conditional text. Make a slicer or visual cross filter and page selection to enable drill through. So there's a page selection made here, which place do I want to drill through to? And it's also asking, hey, make a selection on here. So now it's saying I can drill through to industry details. And then again, also, the tooltip text is saying I can drill through to industry details. If I change this to marketing, it's now saying I can drill through to marketing. So basically it's saying, hey, first make a filter selection. And then instead of having to say right click and drill through via the context menu on the visual, you can just have a big old button that says users can drill through that way. And if I activate it, it will take me to the marketing details page. There we are right here. So a few things that went into this. This came out about a year and a half, I think a year and a half ago, where they created the ability to have conditional drill through actions via buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the button over here. If you look under action, there's a type drill through. Now, the native thing that you can do is you just simply say, where is it going to go? It's always going to go to marketing details. So that's just the destination it's going to go to. But you can also alternatively provide a measure which will give it the name that you want to go to. So I'll show you how I did that. I'm going to go back a couple times, keep going, and one more. There we go. So the measure that is in here, let's just backtrack it because I usually just like to start front to back. Selected page, very easy measure that is in here. Selected page, here we go. And that is a measure that has one function, selected value. And what it is give me one quick sec. There you go. Just had to buzz the delivery in. This is pointed essentially. Let's see if I can do. Here we go. that is pointed to a disconnected table, and it basically harvests the name that I've typed into it. And all I did here, I have a disconnected table called page navigation. I'm going to go ahead and open my query editor just quickly so you can see that. There we go. This is a table that I just used Interdata to make. I just created a 2-row table called page name. I typed in marketing details and industry details. Very simple and clean. A disconnected table where I just manually put the data in there. But that sitting in my model allows me to have a slicer and then allows me to have a measure pointed to the column in that slicer that just grabs the name. So that is populated into here. So now that destination isn't just a single page, it's whatever page I select. There's some other stuff that's related to the tooltips and stuff, but that takes a little bit more time to discuss. So I'll maybe get to that at the tail end. And the disabled tooltip means that if you have drill through selected and there's no filters selected on the page, it's going to be disabled because it needs to have a filter captured for it to actually pass through to another page before it actually can toggle on. So you can basically provide a disabled tooltip and disabled text. In this case, there you go. It becomes undisabled, but that's a forced state that is across all of these buttons. Same thing with button text. You might have noticed that I've talked about default, hover, and press. That fourth state is specifically for drill through. And in this case, I can have custom text in there that just says, hey, make a filter selection. So that's how I was able to set it up. Otherwise, the drill through is set up on a very similar process. Class and country are in there. You just add whatever filters you'd want to from that navigation page. That's something that's passed through automatically. But that's all there really is to it. It's a standard drill through setup. But if you, instead of wanting to use the context menu, meaning right click, drill through and all that, you can have a big clear button with even an option to have multiple drill through pages associated on there onto the page. And I also often will use like something like a background text box or something else as a background frame, because now what this is saying is, hey, by the way, all of these things are related because they're all framed together with this blue color. So it shows an association that these are kind of interconnected with each other as far as at least this implementation goes. But it's a feature that I really like, especially just for the amount that you can customize it to make it very clear what is needed. You can explain exactly what a person needs to do to make this active. So you can provide lots of little helper hints and text through the button and the tooltips to really make sure that the user knows what they need to do. I think I'll finish on this one, but are there any questions on this? And also at this point, we can open it up just to general questions as well. I'll put up some slides too.
That's great. I've always been frustrated with the having to hover or right click in order to get to drill through.
Yeah.
Users don't make that connection.
Exactly. For people who struggle with like finding some of the menus and stuff, it's a nice way to kind of just put it onto the page if necessary. Certainly. I'll mention a couple of things in here as well. I'll also drop this into Teams. That QR code takes you to the website. There's also a series of links in here as well to the presentation PDF, which will also have some resources here at the end of the slides for this. And for anybody that attends any of the presentations that I do, I also provide a code that gives 30% off anything on my website that lasts for about a month, just kind of as a thank you for hanging out with me today and appreciation for that. I'll mention a couple of things. My YouTube channel is a channel that I do about 1 to 2 videos a week. I usually release a recorded video every Tuesday that just talks about various things related to Power BI. And I've been doing live streams this year as well with a lot of guests and other friends and colleagues within the industry, other MVPs, where we just usually talk about cool things. They show a demonstration of something outside of my wheelhouse that I get to share with my users. So feel free to check that out if you're interested in more content. You're welcome to drop me a ping on LinkedIn as well. I'll quickly throw this into the chat. And there's one other QR code that I wanted to throw up. So where are we at here? It's usually really big, but the links work. So that's the important part. Okay. And the last thing that I wanted to bring up, one other kind of thank you, is I provide a blog sign up raffle. So what this will do is it takes you to my blog sign up, which is totally free to sign up for and can cancel at any time. But as a kind of a thank you for that is it puts your name into a hat from all the people who are attending today. And the person whose name is drawn out of that hat gets an hour of consulting time with me. So you can jump on and have me help you with a DAX problem you'd be going through. We can ask for advice on visualizations, basically anything that you would want to get help on, or just are you curious about Power BI. We'll find a time together and hang out for an hour. So that's the basically the hot prize that's drawn from this raffle. But like I said, otherwise, if there's any remaining questions or anything else, I'm happy to answer those now.
If anyone's thinking of any questions to ask while that's going on, I also posted a link to just a Google form where you can fill out your name and email, and I will pick a winner to send an Amazon gift card for thank you for hanging out with us today as well. And I'm not going to use your email for anything other than to send you the gift card digitally. And of course, that all that process is going to be done by Power BI, so it connects to the Google information via connect to web, and then it pulls a random user from that. So
that's fun.
I do have one question.
Sure.
I published that one up. Can you use the Gantt chart visual for time related in a day?
You know, I haven't used the Gantt chart visual that much. If you're referring to the custom visual in the app source marketplace, I can take a look if you send me a ping on LinkedIn. But yeah, I think it's been like 2 years since I've used that on a project, so I'm not sure what its current features are. There's some additional resources as well for some other videos.
And I'll be sure to share all these resources after the meeting as well.
Perfect.
We've got a couple of thank yous, but no other questions, so I will let you go.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out again, everyone. It was yeah, like I said, I always appreciate doing these things, and it's I'm glad even after like I think 65, 70 of these, it's something that I still enjoy doing. So I'll be in it for the long haul.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and with that, I will end things.
Sounds good. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
All right, bye.